So next we're going to move on to Robert Frost. He's much more contemporary in his writing. He was actually born in California, in San Francisco, but he moves to Massachusetts as a teenager. And New England becomes a central theme for most all of his writings. He passes away in 1963 in Boston. So the first poem is called Meandering Wall. You can see the stone wall in the background. And it's a poem about two neighbors that meet in the spring to repair their mutual stone wall. And Frost kind of questions the purpose of the wall. What do we need a wall for? Are borders necessary? Are humans naturally driven toward greater connection and cooperation, or does mistrust instinct always hold us back? This is the main question about Meandering Wall. So the speaker and his neighbors meet in the spring to repair the stone wall between their properties. They review the damage that weather and hunters have caused. And the speaker begins with a reflection. He says, "Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground-swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast." So this is kind of a unique geological situation in New England. What happens in the winter, the ground freezes, and then when the warmer spring weather comes, it causes that ground to lift up. And what happens is the wall is kind of shaky. It's not cemented together. These are just hand placed. They begin to tumble down. And every year and every spring, you have to go out and repair your wall. So there's lots of contradiction in this poem. He says that boundaries that separate neighbors, and yet there are openings in the wall where neighbors can join together. So along these walls, okay, it's walling something in or out, and there'll be an opening, usually with a gate, a wooden gate, so that people can pass by and meet each other. So it's kind of a contradiction. Here we are, we're keeping things out, and yet we have this open doorway where we can cooperate and meet each other together. The men are separate in their own property, and yet they work cooperatively together. So this is mine, this is yours. We don't meet each other, but if we have to, we will cooperate with each other. So Frost asks the question, am I walling something out, or am I walling myself in? You have to think about it. It depends on your perspective. The neighbor doesn't say much. He has one line in the poem, which he says twice. He says, "Good fences make good neighbors." So generally that phrase means that you establish boundaries between you and your neighbor, and that helps both you know how to act and respect each other's space and privacy. Now, a general American characteristic is space and privacy, as opposed to other cultures. American space is generally about 3 feet between each other. When you stand in line, you generally have an arm's length between you and the person ahead of you in line. So I go over to Japan, and I'm maintaining my Yankee personal space of 3 feet. I'm at the post office waiting my turn to mail a letter. And all of a sudden, 3 people come in They see me with my 3 feet, they jump in front of me. They think, hey, he's not in line, he's just standing there. So personal space between cultures can be very different. And privacy is a huge, huge, huge tenet of American culture. So, as an example, I have a friend. I want to visit my friend. I don't just drive over and show up and knock on the door. I call first. Hey, are you okay to have me come by? Are you free this afternoon? Because, in a polite American way, you don't want to disturb them. Now, again, when I'm living over in Asia, people would just drop by at any time, night or day, for no apparent reason, and knock on your door, and that's just the way things were over there. If you live in a small rural community, you might find that to be true as well. Okay, so Frost is getting older in his age, and President Kennedy is inaugurated in 1961, and Robert Frost reads a poem at that inauguration, and we're getting there. But in connection to the Meandering Wall, after the inauguration, Kennedy sends Robert Frost through the Department of State on a cultural mission to Russia to meet Nikita Khrushchev. Of course, there's always tension between America and Russia at that time. So, but it's interesting to note that even though during those tense times, both countries would send their artists, musicians, uh, educators, academics, exchanges of professors, all during this Cold War, so-called Cold War time, as a way to kind of patch things up or keep things cooled down a bit. And so Kennedy sends Frost over to Russia to meet with Khrushchev, and it's called the Frost-Khrushchev Summit. And he reads Meandering Wall, just kind of related to possibly the Berlin Wall in Germany, or how two neighbors can cooperate with each other, that kind of theme. Uh, he is not very successful. A few months later, we have a huge international crisis called the Cuban Missile Crisis. But nevertheless, Frost was sent to the Soviet Union to kind of keep things on an even keel. Okay, so the poem that Frost uh, reads at Kennedy's inauguration is called "The Gift Outright," and he published that in 1942. And it really helped Frost to establish his reputation as a truly national poet. He becomes a national treasure at the end of his life. It's a very short poem, it's only about 16 lines. And it's kind of a brief history of the colonization in America by English and European settlers. It tells how these settlers made this land their own and their love of it and their devotion to it. But in the beginning, of course, the colonies were English, part of England. The land was there to be used to make money, basically, uh, to exploit. There was no real love or connection to the land per se. It wasn't really until after the Revolution that Americans kind of get this feeling of love of country. And he talks about that in the poem. So let's talk about the patriotic feelings during the Revolutionary War. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, hey, everybody's on board with this. We're going to get rid of England and we're going to start our own country. not true. So John Adams, who eventually becomes president, at the time of the Revolution, he estimates that 33% of the colony supported independence. 33% supported England, and 33% had no feeling whatsoever. So here we have 66% of the population that either supports England or doesn't really care either way. And that 33% makes all the difference in the world. So my ancestors were here at that time, and some of them fought in the Revolutionary War. And yet their brothers and cousins and uncles, and some of them left America and went to Canada, which was still under the crown. They were called loyalists. The grandfather that I'm connected to, his father had fought in the Indian Wars, which was kind of the real first World War in a way. It was France and England have been going at it for a long time, and they brought the war from the continental Europe to the United States, and they had some big battles, and that grandfather died in that war. So back then, you're a soldier, you die in a war, your family isn't taken care of. Now the breadwinner's gone. Those young boys that grew up to be soldiers in the Revolutionary War, thinking back, it made their life doubly hard. They had to grow up, work the farm, take care of mom and dad, a whole bunch of kids. Okay. The general feeling was, we know we're going to have to pay taxes. And that's what the war was all about. It was about paying taxes. And they figured, what difference does it make who we pay the taxes to? England or these new guys that want to start a war with England? And the guys that want to start a war with England, they're not local family farmers. They've got plantations. They have huge financial investments and incentive to create their own country, not the general population. Okay, so that's a little bit about Revolutionary War. And Frost also talks a little bit in the poem about the westward expansion of America. So basically, the backdrop of that story is farming in Yankeedom was hard, real hard. Lots of stones, lots of rocks, lots of uncontrollable weather, very harsh winters. Uh, they made a go at farming. It was difficult. They had an opportunity later in history, maybe 150 years later. They closed down the farm, abandoned them, and moved everything they owned out west where they could get more land, cheaper land, better farming land. So that was part of what the Western movement in America became later. And Frost talks about that in the poem as well. So eventually in time, going from being British loyal subject citizens pre-revolution to actually having a sense of national identity and pride. And that's basically what the poem is about. But Frost's most famous poem is called "The Road Not Taken," and I'm going to try to read this. I hope I can do it some justice, but here we go. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could. to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that passing there, had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. This poem really talks about the human condition, and this happens to all of us. Have you ever had to make a decision, a major decision, a life major decision, like which college do I go to? Should I go here? Should I go there? Should I go to college? Should I learn a trade? Should I marry this girl or this guy or that girl or that guy? These are serious life choices that we all have to make. And that's what the poem is about. But what he says is he takes the road that most people wouldn't take. Okay, maybe just for the adventure of it. And he thinks, oh, I'll just try it for a while, and I can always go back and take the other road if I have to. But that's not the way life works. Once you get on a road and a path, things happen, and then other things happen, and then you're caught up in all those other things that happen. So once you make that life decision, you're on that road, you're on that path, and that's what he's talking about in his poem. And that's probably his most famous poem to date. Okay, so that's our poetry pieces.